So, welcome back to the FITSNews studio. We are joined today by freshman State Senator Matt Leber from Charleston County, Johns Island. I
John's
got
Island,
right?
that's right.
Awesome. You won a very contentious race for your
Yeah.
seat. And in fact, Dylan and I were talking about it earlier, probably the most contentious state Senate race in the entire state of South Carolina during the last election cycle,
Mhm,
knocking off an incumbent, a lawyer legislator,
mhm.
Sandy Sin. Tell us a little bit about that race. That was a brutal fight, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a fight. It sure was, and, I didn't aspire to run for Senate. That wasn't why I got into, public life, and I was happy in my House seat, but I just observed that no one else was willing to take it on. No one wanted to be in that fight. Whoever got into that fight was gonna get the treatment that I got, and I knew
Mm.
it. We all knew it, and I think others knew it, and that's why they didn't run. I mean, there was one guy that was talking about it, and he's now running for Congress. He'd rather run for Congress than face Sandy Sina.
Yeah,
So
she's a
that
very
tells you,
powerful lawyer
yeah.
legislator.
And we knew it was going to be a fight, but we just felt like we outworked her. As a citizen of the district, I didn't feel like she represented my values.
Mhm.
So I wanted a Republican that
Right.
that fought for the platform. And when I saw that no one else was going to run, I just felt duty bound, and I had to do it. Sometimes
Yeah.
duty calls and you can't refuse, and that's where I was at on that. But it was a tough race. We worked hard. We worked very hard,
Yeah.
harder than I've ever done anything in my life. I'm proud of that win. We all
Yeah.
are, the whole team, family, and
Yeah, you got a family operation down there. You guys have been at work not only at the state level, but the local level. Your wife recently elected as well.
that trustee of the Charleston
Yeah.
School Board was a big deal. She beat an incumbent as well, the Democrat that held that seat, and she beat him by 20 points, also outworking. So proud of that. They're putting us in charge of everything down there.
That's great, man. Well, give us a little background before you talk about being called to run. Give us a little bit of background about you. Just our audience probably doesn't know you that well, but tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about yourself. What led you to where you are in life now?
Well, I think, COVID and the whole COVID era was um, enlightening for a lot of us.
Yeah.
We understood. We were seeing levels of government being exposed in real time. And that motivated me to do more than just talk about the issues. And I saw that I was in a Democrat held seat
Yeah.
in the House, and I wanted to do something. I wanted to get elected, and I felt like it would be better for me to go find a Democrat to pick on and win that way
Sure.
instead of primarying a Republican right out of the gate. That might have been 10% less conservative than me or something like that. So
Mhm.
I had been watching the seat, and the guy that had been running was just losing it every time, becoming closer and closer. And I knew that I could probably win if I ran, so I did it. And I just wanted to make a difference. I wanted to give a voice to folks like me, in the low country,
Yeah.
the shrimpers, the fishermen, the guys that lumber, in the area that were doing the everyday work and not necessarily having a voice in Columbia. And felt like I was the right man for that. And I think the voters felt that way and still feel that way. And I want to continue to serve as long as they'll have me.
Definitely. Well, it's a swing district down there. Obviously, the
Mm.
Low Country has been very, at best, purple, uh,
We're
more
trending
likely
better.
blue. Turn
You
a
know,
little bit more purple these days
Trump came
down
within
there.
10,000 votes of winning Charleston County.
Yeah,
And
Nancy Mace won Charleston County
yeah,
last time, so there's
so,
some hope for the Republican Party. We'll
mhm,
talk about what exactly that means,
right.
Republican these days. When it's a
Yeah.
definition that's a bit up for debate, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But I do want to talk. You mentioned just a moment ago about COVID, your
Hmm.
experiences with COVID, and how that sort of exposed and
Hmm.
enlightened you to the kind of dangerous reach of government. And you have
Hmm.
taken a leadership role during your first session in the Senate in helping stand up against a gubernatorial nominee who
Hmm.
really defined that oppressive authoritarian COVID regime here in South
Hmm.
Carolina, Dr. Edward Simmer.
Right.
Now, his nomination has, for all intents and purposes, stalled out in the Senate.
Mm.
Tell us a little bit about that fight. What's motivated you to be the leader in
Well,
that fight?
even before I ran for office, I was sympathetic to the firemen, the policemen, the teachers that were being fired because they wouldn't take the COVID shot,
Hmm.
the mandated shot, because the local government was mandating it, or the local entities that they were employed by were mandating it. And my biggest problem with Simmer all along has been that he didn't speak up.
Mhm.
And he admitted in the hearings when I was questioning him that he thought it was inappropriate and unnecessary to fire these folks for not taking the shot. But he couldn't be bothered as our expert on health in South Carolina to speak up and say, look, maybe that's not necessary to fire these folks. And
Mhm.
so um, that was motivating for me
Mhm.
to see that in real time, and then knowing that the same guy that held that position or lack of leadership was now up for the same position or even a greater role in health for South Carolina. And I was committed. I mean, I got into public life because of the COVID regime business. There was no way that I was not going to
Yeah.
fight this nomination. And there were a couple other senators that came out early, Senator Kimbrell, Senator Fernandez,
Mhm.
that stated that they were like me, they were against no matter what. But I think it's just sort of fact that I took the lead on it, and gave the hardest questions during the hearing, and doing the follow up now, like what's next.
Yeah.
Um,
Because he failed to clear that committee with a favorable
12-5.
recommendation. So he's
Yeah, and so we're in that sort of area of um, looking at the Constitution, looking at the rules, the Senate rules, looking at the role of the governor and what should be happening. I would have thought that over that weekend he would have withdrawn his name,
right.
um, but I fear possibly the governor's strategy in this is just sort of wait it out, do a sort of quasi vacancy appointment or recess appointment of sorts.
Let me ask you about him though, if you don't mind. I'm
Mhm,
sorry to interrupt, but you talked earlier about Republicans not running against a Republican who might be 10% less conservative than you.
mhm,
Let's talk about our Republican governor. He tells us every chance he gets how conservative he is.
mhm,
Joined at the hip with MAGA and Donald Trump, and yet
mhm,
he nominates this Fauci-style COVID authoritarian to be the state's health czar. He nominates an eco-radical bureaucrat, 30-year bureaucrat in
mhm,
the pocket of the Coastal Conservation League
mhm.
to be his enviro czarina.
Yeah.
What the hell is up with the
Well,
governor of South Carolina on these appointments?
I think, and when you're an executive, your highest valued commodity is loyalty. And if you look at Trump and the Lindsey Graham endorsement, um, maybe Trump is trading in that commodity of loyalty, showing that he can be loyal to people so that they'll be loyal back. Now, I'm not in the executive branch. I don't operate that way. Maybe that is the strategy from McMaster's. I don't know. He appointed him early on, stuck by him, supported him, and he's just showing that loyalty to Simmer and Reese. Um,
But you
I,
agree they're both terrible
I
appointees.
think it's ill advised, especially Simmer. I know more about Simmer than I do Reese because I dedicated the last month or two to really figuring out where I was going to go with Simmer. I mean, I FOIA'd all his emails and texts and everything going back to the COVID era,
Mhm.
and so I've been deep diving in all that. So I know more about him. I do think that the governor probably should have picked. I wish he would have picked a 40-year-old guy that goes to the gym, eats healthy, and doesn't see disease around every corner.
I
I
mean, look
think
at who Trump has picked for those posts. He's put
right.
reformers in the EPA. He's put the ultra reformer as his health czar.
Yeah.
Why is South Carolina continuing to?
I really can't answer for the governor, and I tread lightly in that area because I don't. That's not my role as a senator to be the guy picking the nominee. It's me to give the advice and consent. That's my role.
Well, let's talk about your role. Let's talk about the legislative role. You're obviously a member of the Senate, which is incredibly powerful in South Carolina.
Mhm.
Senators, 46 senators, they have tremendous authority in
Yeah.
the legislative state. Which, let's face it, we're in a state without checks and balances. It is a legislatively dominated state. You guys control the judiciary and you control broad swaths of the executive. So I want to ask you, it has been since 22 years since Republicans took control of every facet of state government. They now have super majorities in the Senate and the House. Let me ask you just a blunt question. What have we gotten from that? What's been the point of that?
Well, I'm.
Our roads are still terrible. Our
Mhm.
schools are still terrible.
Well,
Our
I ran against a Republican,
correct,
um, primary the
correct.
Republican. So I feel your frustration in many of these areas.
All right.
But um, my time in the House, I thought that the Speaker did a good job pivoting away from the the, the Speaker Lucas regime. We did take on constitutional carry, the abortion bill,
Mhm,
um, the protecting women's sports, some of these pretty hefty conservative issues.
mhm.
There was a solid pivot, I think. Can we do more? Absolutely. And so I do want to speak for the time that
Yeah.
I've been in. I feel
Let's
like,
let's do that. What's been done this year?
well, we've covered a lot of complex and contentious issues. The energy bill and the 244 tort reform
Mhm.
things. Or they were took a lot of our time
Yeah.
this session. In fact, you had to remember that we had the latest opening possible, second Tuesday. It happened to be the 14th of January,
Mhm.
and so we're 2 weeks away from being done, and it's gone by in a blitz.
Yeah.
And as a junior senator, I'm still figuring out the role and figuring out the process. I mean, I had 3 or 4 committee hearings yesterday.
Mhm.
It's a busy, busy, busy job.
Yeah.
But I think there's the school choice. We tried to handle that right away, and it's
Mhm.
come back from the House, and we took it up again yesterday, and we've got some work still to do on that. And I'm
But doesn't
hoping.
that bill, I mean, that bill pales in comparison to even some smaller scale choice bills in other states. I mean,
I was
we,
on the amendment with Senator Clymer,
yeah,
I think Senator Kimbrell, to go full
yeah,
full school choice. So
which we're, but
that's my position.
fair
Um,
enough. But we're nowhere near that in South Carolina. Are we anywhere near a
Unfortunately,
tax cut at some point? I mean, I heard your Senate Finance Chairman, Harvey Peeler, who has said that he is going to one up the House on tax relief. But you've got a House proposal that's basically $1 billion tax hike
yeah,
on the middle class. We've
yeah.
got a Senate proposal that, what, $290 million out of a what, $40 billion budget?
Well, you
What's
saw that I put in the no tax on tips bill,
okay?
the South Carolina version of that, and Senator Peeler liked it, and it actually got a committee hearing. It's still in committee. We're still working it. That's unusual for a freshman senator to even get a bill in, finance going in those directions. So,
Yeah.
and I'm on the record for being wanting to take up the Tennessee model, no
Hmm.
income tax, figure out how the revenue in different ways. Um, so I'm frustrated
And you're
with the
with Senator
House.
Peeler on the earmarks. You want to get rid of
Yes,
the earmarks?
yes. I did no earmarks. I did some earmarks when I was first elected to the House because I was in a blue district that had been neglected in
Right.
my mind. For example, Edisto Beach was spending all their money on beach restoration when they could have been taking care of their meter problem and other normal maintenance of town issues. So I helped them out in that area. But since then, I haven't had any earmarks. I'm for this pause on earmarks or getting rid of them in general. But I will say, if we're going to get rid of earmarks where we can't spend money in district, we need to make sure we're getting rid of all the DEI, all the woke stuff in the budget, all the money that we're spending on stuff. If we're going to cut spending for the home districts, we need to cut that spending for sure. And I'll be looking for that next week.
You've also taken a very firm stand on a local issue, the Charleston County Library Board, their members refusing to take the oath of office to hold those seats. You've been front and center driving
Yeah.
that debate. Let me ask you a question. I'm a taxpayer in Richland County, here in the belly of the beast, so to speak, the heart of the South Carolina swamp. I guess, how does that issue? Why does it matter for someone like me or a taxpayer in Greenville? How does that impact our bottom line?
Well, I think it's going to matter for sure. I have an amendment, a proviso for Budget Week that's
Mhm,
going to require all boards and commissions throughout the state
mhm.
take the oath at their next meeting or they lose their funding. And I've got, I think it was 24 senators that signed on the letter
That's good.
supporting that. I think it's an opportunity for real reform. If you have folks, I don't care what party you're associated with or what your principles are on any other issue, if you can't take an oath to the Constitution, you're a radical.
Yeah,
You need to be removed.
yeah.
And if we have those radicals in any level of government in South Carolina, they need to be exposed. They need to be removed.
Mhm. Well, our
So,
governor keeps nominating them. That's the problem.
well,
Well, I mean, but
luckily we have an election coming up.
Yeah, yeah, we do. We do. We've got a bunch of statewide elections coming up.
Mhm.
So let me ask you this. So we go back. I think we met. What was it? 2023 at the. It was in Tuscaloosa.
Debate.
Yeah, the debate.
I mean, well, I think we spoke before that, but we met in person
Yeah,
for the first time there. That really great debate with
I had
Vivek.
a little better seat than you though.
You did. You were up front, and I think there was a reason for
I was
that.
sitting next to, I had Vivek's wife on one side
Yeah,
and DeSantis on the other. I was the whole time
yeah,
thinking, how do I work this? Something that the whole time. No, I'm kidding. I wasn't
yeah.
thinking that. Well, so yeah, Nikki Haley was at that debate. She was a
Mhm.
little off her game that night, wasn't she?
I think so. I
Wonder
think
what.
that was sort of the point of that front row ticket.
Well, let me ask you this though. We have known each other a while. We talked about a lot of
Mhm.
issues, and so I hope you'll forgive me for being blunt. But
I wouldn't expect anything else.
you were speaking earlier about the folks that you want to represent, the
Mhm.
loggers, the shrimpers, the small business folks.
Mhm.
I want to ask you about 244 in this tort debate, and I want to ask you if you think that the compromise that you voted for that cleared the Senate,
Mhm.
is it going to help any of those people, or is it going to help the trial lawyer lobby? And let me just lay it out.
Mhm.
First of all, do you think it's either or do you think it helps one side more than the other? But you voted for a compromise that a lot of folks have been very critical of, including me, um, for being too friendly to the trial lawyers. What's your response to that?
Well, I didn't like the fact that the bill was sort of anonymous. Um, I like single subject matter legislating. I thought that this bill encompassed too many different areas and topics. And that was the difficulty in actually getting it to pass. I mean, there's 46 senators.
Mhm.
They all have their particular issues. And I had my particular issue with the bill, and I'll discuss it in a second. But you have to realize that bill went through subcommittees and committees, hearings. I mean, I think they had over a dozen meetings, right?
Yeah.
And the bill was, what, 180 some pages, right? It was huge.
Mhm.
It was big and for like state house standards. It was a large, difficult, complex bill. It came out of all those hearings. It had never been amended, not one time.
Mhm.
Came to the floor. Had so not being
Why
amended.
wasn't it amended?
That's a good question. That's a really good
Wasn't there a
question.
committee process during which the trial lawyer lobby refused to negotiate to amend the bill?
Um, I wasn't privy to that level of the negotiating at that time.
But you know those guys pretty well. Your consultant
Yeah.
is one of their leading advisors,
Well, he's not my
Chris
consultant.
Slick.
Yeah,
He's not your consultant?
not on like retainer. We got
Okay.
through the elections. I was paying him for that particular work,
Because he's also the
not
guy
for
that's
policy.
targeting all of the conservative
Yeah,
lawmakers in the
he's
House.
got plenty of clients, I suppose.
Well, they all seem to be
Yeah,
pushing for the wrong things, though.
yeah. Well, again, I don't answer for the governor, and I don't answer for any paid consultant of Columbia. They choose their work
Fair enough.
based on their needs, but
You answered yesterday, though, for one of your colleagues, though, Carlisle
I
Kennedy.
did.
We had criticized him on FITSNews for taking a bunch of money from trial lawyers. We obviously published his response. He wrote a very nice letter
I did.
back, and we
And you were
published
very
that.
fair and you do that. You give that open sort of mic.
Tried to do that, but you didn't take kindly to our criticism. You called him a man of integrity and all
Yeah.
that.
Well, I'll get to the back to the, I'll take you to why I said that.
Okay.
The bill had never been amended. We got to the floor, and amendment number one came up. And that was the one where it was
The trial lawyer amendment.
it was a proposed negotiating sort of document that had different ideas in it, right? So we voted to not table it.
Hmm.
We never once voted on the merit of that amendment. We voted to not table it because I felt like, and I'm not going to speak for Senator Kennedy, but many of us felt like there hadn't been enough negotiating. There hadn't been enough discussion on what, with each person, each senator being able to discuss their issue. Because my issue was the Chinese corporations being on the verdict form and basically where we don't have jurisdiction over them, which would give the American importer, let them be completely off the hook if they brought in a dangerous product and South Carolina was injured by it. So there's no way to recover from that Chinese company. And the leader knew that was my issue. I didn't want those foreign companies being on the verdict
So
form.
we should saddle the HVAC installer who is not at fault
M-
for it. We
My
should send him 100% of the
Well,
bill for the
no.
Chinese
Well,
manufacturers screw up.
I'll carry you through it.
Okay.
My position was the American importer that's bringing in dangerous products should be on the hook for it. And that's a South Carolina company, then so be it. If you're bringing in a product that damages, let's say it's a deer stand, and like a hunter climbs a deer stand, it collapses, he's paralyzed, or God forbid, it dies. When you go to recover and you've got that Chinese company available to assign blame to, maybe the judge or the jury gives 80%. So this family, this spouse, these kids get 20% of what they would have otherwise gotten because we let the Chinese company. We have no
Well, after
jurisdiction.
the trial lawyers take their 40% cut.
Lawyers are lawyers. Look, I
They
often
are.
said one of my lines was often if I could take all the insurance CEOs and trial lawyers and line them up on the wall and bullwhip them equally, I would have done it. I was
Mm,
frustrated with all of them. Okay.
okay.
But that was my issue though, was that one thing.
Okay.
It wasn't getting heard. And I'm a
Okay.
junior senator, newly elected,
Hmm.
and not as much leverage as someone who'd been there for quite a while, as you can imagine. What else can I do but use my vote to get
Hmm.
my issue looked at and assessed? And so that's what I did. And
Okay.
I did it. It's a sort of a parliamentary sort of tactic. I mean, you're sophisticated to understand how these things happen in a parliamentary environment. We never voted on the merit of that amendment. We just voted on whether we were going to table it or not.
Okay.
And when the Senate refused to table it, the leader basically shut things down. He gavelled us out, um, which I thought was pretty unusual. But it was a very complex topic, so maybe it needed to be discussed outside of the chamber and negotiations would happen. And that's indeed what happened. Is
But you
that
were upset though when we called out your colleague for taking the trial lawyer money and then
I,
voting.
I was upset because you sort of assign his vote to him taking
Mm,
contributions. Um, and as you know, when there's any heavy topic or any heavy bill that comes up before the House or the Senate, both sides are going to be involved. They're going to be advocating for their position,
yeah.
and that includes fundraising, and that's just a fact. Um, and usually, senators or House legislators will have one or two fundraisers during the cycle in Columbia, and his happened to be with trial
Mm.
lawyer
Well, I mean, let's not
organizations.
talk about it. Let's talk about yours because I mean, we pulled your disclosure before you came in, and we got trial lawyers,
There's a lot of vape guys in there too.
trial lawyers. No, we looked at it. About 2/3 of your funding from this past quarter is from the trial lawyer lobby.
Yeah,
There's not loggers on here or shrimpers on here or small
yeah.
businesses on here. There are trial lawyers on here,
That was
Senator.
the big issue, was the tort reform, and those are the principles and the folks that are
But
interested in that
here's the
legislation.
difference: is they offered me money too. They offered me $100,000.
What did you do for
You
their
know what I
money?
told them? I told them to fuck off.
What did you do
I
for
told them
their?
I was going to work for the other side for free
What did
because
you
that's
do?
what. No,
What
I'm
did?
sorry. Hold on. That's what people who are principled on an issue do. They don't take money from people like this. And the other thing I noticed on this list, none of these people are in your district. They're all in Columbia or Greenville.
If you look at my,
Several of them hid their.
if you look at my campaign fundraising for the entire 4 years that I've been in Paul, 5 years, um, there's money from all sorts of different interests. Um,
But I'm looking at during this debate. This is all money that
but
came
if
to
you
you
look at
during the
when the
debate.
vape bill came up in the House,
Okay.
and it came up in committees in the Senate, in the House, when I read that bill, I said, this is not um, fair. This is a monopoly for big tobacco, and I fought it
Okay.
on my own accord. I
Okay.
fought that bill. The vape folks that were in the room or watching saw that I was fighting for it and began speaking to me and said, "Look, here's more information on that issue, and this is our issue. We'd like to help you,
Right.
and we want you to be elected." My primary opponent was on the other side. She was on the side of big tobacco. So, of course, they're going to support my election or reelection because they have an advocate now that fights for their cause. That's a natural process, and it's very easy to sort of describe it in some sort of corrupt or unhealthy way. But in that standard that you're sort of presenting right now, who can take any money for anything? for campaigning. I mean, unfortunately, politics and campaigning takes money to win.
Mhm.
You're not gonna. I was outspent by Sandy Sand 4 times, four
Mhm.
times over, and won barely by 30 some votes. But if I wouldn't have raised the bit that I did run, I'd have had no chance, no opportunity. So when I'm talking about advocating and supporting the folks back home, if I don't play by the on the field that's presented, I never get the opportunity to advocate for them. Right? I never get the chance to take office.
And I guess the argument would be that as it relates to this issue, you didn't. You advocated for the people that were
Well, that's
paying
your
the.
opinion on this, Will.
Okay.
I advocated and I presented to you that my problem was the foreign companies
Okay.
that were going to be on the verdict form. That was my bigger problem. I also wanted the liquor liability issues solved,
Yeah. I mean, this bill wasn't perfect.
and
Let's
we
go
saw.
ahead and
Oh,
credit to
but
you. The
when
bill
is
was,
any
yeah.
legislation perfect? And to suppose that we got a bill that was drafted, never being amended, and we're going to be up in arms because we refused to table the very first amendment presented, that that doesn't make any sense either.
Mhm.
And we never voted on the merits of that amendment. There was a whole lot of negotiating that went on. This is a very complex issue. And again, you have 46 senators with their pet uh, part of the tort reform. And again, I didn't want an all encompassing bill. I wanted a single subject matter bill. I wanted it broken up 3 or 4 times. That was my issue,
Mhm.
or that was my position. And I made it very clear. So, but I think it's unfair to suppose or to sort of assign the fact that Senator Kennedy or I got some contributions from some group or some individual that happens to be a lawyer or happens to be a fisherman or whatever, and then suggest that because I took that contribution, I'm now beholden to them.
Mhm.
That's simply not true.
Mhm.
I've proven over and over that I fight for my principles. I fight for what I believe in.
Mhm.
I don't put my finger in the air and decide where the wind's blowing.
Mhm.
I never have done that. I've
Mhm.
taken some tough votes.
Yeah.
If you'll recognize when that vape bill came to the Senate floor, I and West Senator Clymer were the only ones that voted against it.
Mhm.
And it was Senator Alexander, the president's bill. So to suggest that I won't take a strong position or I will do something other than what I believe in or what my principles are
Mhm.
is unfair, um, patently false.
Fair enough.
And you're connecting contributions to and supposing because you disagree with my position
I'm
that
just
I'm
asking the
somehow
question.
corrupt.
I never said you were corrupt. I'm
Yeah.
asking the question. You talked about all the different people you represented, and I didn't see any of them supporting you financially. I did see a bunch of people who are on the other side of
I
an
vote
issue that's hurting those people.
I fought
That's hurting
against
those people.
heavy regulation on blue crab industry last session. So and that's also you're sort of taking the schedule and applying it in an unfair way.
Okay.
Maybe, and I also took to the floor with Senator Campson advocating for the loggers. So it's not quite fair to suggest that I'm not working for
I
those
think it's
folks as
pretty fair.
well.
We spent 2/3 of an interview talking about a lot of the good things you've done,
Yeah.
and clearly you don't like this line of questioning for some
Oh,
reason.
I'm fine with it. I'm pointing out the fallacy in it.
Okay. Well, that's fair enough. I mean, it has
That
been a very contentious issue,
yeah.
and certainly a lot of folks are entitled to their opinion. I'm just trying to explain to our audience that sometimes those opinions can be bought. You're telling me yours hasn't been. I respect that. That's why
I
we asked the
suppose
question.
anything is possible, but you're strongly implying that Senator Kennedy's vote or my vote was somehow purchased, and
Well, in
that's
fairness to you and Senator Kennedy, I think your campaign disclosure strongly suggested, not Will Folks. But anyway,
wait a minute, wait a
we
minute.
can move on
What?
from it if you
No,
want.
I'm not going to move on.
Sure.
What my campaign disclosure um, reports disclose is my contributions.
Correct.
The dots that you're connecting, that my contributions equal to my vote or guide my vote, is the fallacy.
Okay.
That is what my campaign disclosures represent, is the money or campaign contributions that many different entities have given me, particularly during tort reform. Of course, the folks that are interested in that topic are going to engage with the elected folks they're about to make a decision on their topic. So that's normal.
Right.
It doesn't mean that my vote was purchased because I received contributions from anyone ever, and it never will. So I'm going to always strongly push back on that.
And that's fair enough. That's why we ask the questions to have this. And again, we have an open mic here. That's why we do this.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
my job is to raise these issues, to put them out there, to let folks kind of see those dots you're talking about. And frankly, there's a line from Fletch about doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to connect certain dots. Larry Holmes could have connected those dots. I think this is one of those situations. But again, you tell me that it's not
Well,
so.
I
I
mean,
take you
if
at
you,
your word.
I think you would need more evidence to suggest that, though. You would have to probably see me taking positions and then changing my position after I got a contribution or something.
Hmm.
There needs to be more evidence before you make that implication.
Okay.
I think so. I think that would be fair. And
Well, we will follow your votes on whether it's lawsuit reform, whether it's judicial selection reform, whether it is tougher penalties on some of these violent criminals that routinely get set free by the lawyer legislator appointed judges. We will
you really got it out for those
absolutely.
folks, don't you?
Well, I've got it out for two things, sir. I have it out for folks who create a system that's unfair, and I
Hmm.
have it out for folks who create a system that is dangerous. I've got 8 kids. I want to raise them in a state where they don't have to worry about violent
And
criminals
I've
running
taken
free
some very
because judges have, yeah,
strong positions on that.
yeah. Well, we've led the we were doing that before you were even elected. So,
Right.
but welcome to the fight.
I signed on with Representative Pace's bill that brought the death penalty into potential sentencing for pedophiles.
That's great.
So I've taken some very strong positions in those areas,
Mm.
and I think I always will.
But let's get back though to outcomes though. We keep talking about all these positions and what the legislature's doing, and I would argue you had mentioned a moment ago about how different this session had been and contentious, whether on this issue we've been discussing or many other issues. Doesn't seem like much has gotten done to move the ball forward. Again, whether it's with our schools, with our roads, public safety, all of these metrics are moving in the wrong direction, Senator, and they've been moving in the wrong direction for decades. Our income levels, our labor participation rate, third worst in the country. Uh, what has
Um,
Republican rule, and frankly, what has a Republican supermajority done to fix any of that? It's a basic question.
well, you got some new senators that have come on, the biggest class ever, 13 of us, and
What
I
have y'all
think
done?
we take some strong positions.
You've taken strong
You
positions, but
you
what has been done?
Well, we had the school choice bill that came up early on. It was like the first week, and I was one of 3 senators that jumped on the amendment to go to complete universal school choice. That's my position, and I want to fight for that.
Yeah.
Taxes, I want to go to zero income tax. The
Yeah.
Tennessee model. That's my position. I'm one of 46.
Yeah.
Seniority is a big deal in the Senate, but I think I've had a great year. I think I've been out front and shown some real leadership in a lot of different areas,
You have
and I
on
think that's
several
been
issues.
seen. Um, so I'm with you. I want the end results to better reflect my political philosophy, and that is, America first, minimal government, minimal taxes.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I you got to remind yourself though. Jefferson always said, anytime the legislature's in session, your rights and are in jeopardy.
Yeah. That's for sure.
And I'm also a sort of scholar of President Coolidge, who often said that sometimes it's better to kill bad bills than it is to pass a good bill. Um, I was active in that just yesterday
My favorite
with that.
president, by the way.
Yeah, mine too. The special interest regulatory that was attempted in LCI yesterday in the subcommittee. If you, I've posted the clip on X. If you see that, I really question that person hard, and that bill's dead.
Yeah.
It's dead. Before I began to question her, that bill was sort of on its way to the floor. So, um, you got to do all you can,
Yeah.
and I never stop doing this job. I mean, I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about this work. Um, I think the Senate is better now after this last election. I think there's a lot of good new guys that have come in that are making a difference and figuring their roles out. And I think the future's bright. I think we're going to have a more conservative government going forward. Um, so I'm optimistic,
We'll see.
and I'm gonna do my part.
Before you go, I know you got a lot going on today. I appreciate you being generous with your time. Before you go, though, I got to ask you, there's a big vote coming up in your chamber this coming week on Treasurer Curtis Loftus. Big battle over whether or not he should be removed from office over a $1.8 billion accounting error. I say accounting error,
Yeah,
that would tend to lead me to the Comptroller General's office, which is the accountant for the state. But be that as it may, Curtis Loftus in the
right.
firing line. What do you see this coming week? The effort to remove Curtis Loftus, obviously being led by Senators Larry Grooms and Stephen Goldfinch. What do you see on that vote? Do Goldfinch and Grooms have the votes to remove Curtis Loftus from office?
Um, Probably. Um,
Well, they need 2/3 in both chambers, though.
Talk about a complex thing. Well, I mean, the House is going to do what the House is going to do. So I know nothing about their plans on this. I know that we're going to have a hearing, body, committee of the body or full committee. The Senate, being the Senate, is going to operate as a committee, and we're going to have question and answer. It's probably going to be all day long. There are probably going to be some things that come out that cannot be ignored, and
Like
was
what?
the handling of the problem. I think one of the biggest concerns is this maybe he knew this problem existed for years and years and years, didn't bring it to the attention of the General Assembly. There were actions that he probably should have taken. Um, I think it was unfortunate the letter that he sent to the Senate describing what he was about to do with exposing, bank accounts and other things. I think that's troubling. I want to hear more about that. Um, I, I I think it's just it's a bad deal
Does the
to
Senate
even
run the
be
risk,
doing
though?
this, having to do this is not a comfortable place to be.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate for South Carolina.
And I guess my question would be this: you've got this SEC at the
Hmm.
federal level already investigating this.
Hmm.
Why not let them do the job as opposed to the Senate politicizing it?
Yeah. Well, these hearings have
And
been
again,
going
you're
how
not
many
driving this.
3
I'm
or
not.
4 years now, right? I
Right.
mean, there's a lot of baggage involved in all this. There's a lot of tension
It's a
between
dick
the
measuring
parties.
contest.
Probably there's a lot of tension between the two parties. A lot of acrimony. That's real. And sometimes when you're a new member of the family, you just have to accept that exists, and you have to just find your way in that dynamic. I'm trying to do that. I consider myself sort of a juror in this, and I'm
Fair
trying
enough.
my best to sequester myself, really, not hear all the noise from the social media and podcasts, etc. But it's difficult not to. I personally, and this is going to sound crazy to a lot of people, but I personally like Curtis Loftus. I've spent time in his office
I
talking
like
to
him
him.
too. He's set right where you have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's fun to talk to. I disagree with a lot of things he says, um, but he's fun to talk to. I don't have that acrimony towards Curtis, the treasurer. I've just got to hear what it's going to be, what's going to be presented. I have a couple of questions myself that I'm going to ask, and hopefully the treasurer has really good answers. And then I'm just going to have to make up my mind based on the evidence. And I hope the public pays very close attention so that whatever the Senate does, they understand why we did, why we had to do what we did, on Monday, or we chose not to do the resolution. It's going to be a very, very difficult vote, but that's why you're in this job. It's to make those very, very difficult votes. Everybody's got opinions. Everybody's got their positions. Everybody will get on social media and fight those things, but only a very few people have to actually cast that vote in the end. And it's not as easy as folks may think. These issues are complicated. The tort reform, very, very complex issue. Sometimes you have to get all you can get and move on and hope for a better day, or maybe you can come back and get another piece by the apple. I mean, the Democrats do that all the time. Republicans fail to take what they can and come back and get more. And that would be a strategy to better um, bring South Carolina into that red state environment that you describe, and I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to do that fight and grind. Legislating is sometimes just a grind, and that's something that I've learned in my short period here. But I enjoy it. I love the job. I love doing it, and I'll serve as long as the folks want that to happen.
Senator, you've done a lot of good on a lot of issues in your service in the Senate and the work you're doing back in Charleston County.
Yeah,
So very much appreciate that, and I also really appreciate you being willing to come in, take some tough questions on
sure.
issues. And I want you to know our microphones are always open to you.
Yeah.
Please come anytime,
Mhm.
whether it's something you want to respond to, whether it's something you want to
Oh,
proactively
you know I'll
address.
respond.
I do. But you're
Yeah,
seriously always welcome, man. And I
yeah,
really appreciate you being generous with your time and being willing to take some tough questions.
sure. Yeah, always, always will. Thanks, Will.